All right, we got a fun one, Pauline. Totally fun one, Pauline. And guess what? It's night time. I went out here. Can you hear it? I'll turn the gain up for you. See, lots of insects and things going woo woo and shit, right? So I was out there. I saw a shooting star. It shot down. It went down. All right. So while I was out there watching Shooting Star, my YouTube gave me this magical video. This magical video, Pauline, and I just downloaded it. I really had to comment on it, and it's not even downloaded yet, Pauline. Not even downloaded yet, Pauline. Like tickety tick 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 tick. There we go. There we go. Just going to pause now, and we're going to discuss this wonderful video. It's story time again, Pauline, but this is kind of a nice story of hell.
Dave Price, thank you so much for joining me. How do you cope with the abuse that Jacinta cops, particularly now with this voice debate? I'd be lying awake at night plotting all sorts of technicolor revenge.
Yeah, you would think that, wouldn't you, Pauline? If they tried to jab you with some poisons inside one of those forensic mental health places, you'd think that people would roll around at night and not be able to sleep and have some sort of PTSD after they'd been threatened like that, wouldn't you, Pauline? Like, that's why you get to learn to defend yourselves with your words, Pauline, and your brain, Pauline. That's why you start looking up all the legislations and all the laws about how these people got to do those sorts of things to you in the first place. Right? And that's where you get to defend yourself. So just waiting to hear here, like, I bet you the same sort of thing. Got ready to defend themselves against something bitter in the world, right? Something bitter in the world.
Well, I've been through that stage, I suppose, but I'd have to say we're used to it. Bess was, my wife was similarly abused when she successfully ran for the N2 Parliament. I think I come from a very working class background.
Oh, why, Pauline? There's that patrician pleb separation again. There's that pleb patrician separation again. Why, Pauline? Working class background. Working class background. So Jacinta's not of the working class anymore, but we try hard. We do, we really do. At least this was better than Bar Betty. I mean, Bar Betty was so obvious it wasn't funny, was it? He only does that shit on the weekends, Pauline. Only does that shit on the weekends.
We're used to the idea that sometimes you have to fight. My wife comes from a community that's usually, most often, riven by feuding, very violent feuding. We understand that really it doesn't matter what you say, somebody's going to hate you for it.
Oh, you couldn't be more right about that. So I'd just like to say hi to Delina, a trainee of mine in Alice Springs, like legend woman, like legend woman. Okay, so I couldn't agree with this more. You try and stand up and do the right thing and bring truth to the table. And Michael Lawler squashes it down and fucks you over, just like he did to Craig Thompson, Pauline. Just like he did to Craig Thompson, Pauline. Just like he did to Craig Thompson, Pauline.
I think my daughter does an excellent job of fighting back, really, and defending herself. When she was young, we decided very early in her life that she needed some training in martial arts, and we made sure she got that. Not just so that she could physically defend herself, but that it give her the confidence to deal with this sort of aggressive idiocy that she cops all the time. And I don't know, you'd have to ask her, but I think that's helped.
Oh, what was that stupid thing I was a part of when I was working in Alice Springs, Pauline? They had orange T-shirts. Oh, I don't want to mention their name. It was total waste of time. It was total sellout. It was total con. It was a suck up of all the state's money to give the Aborigine nothing. To give them nothing. to give them totally nothing. I remember it totally, that they had orange shirts. I had to wear an orange shirt while I played stupid games for the Aboriginal kids. And I just lied, and I told all the Aboriginal kids the answers so they'd win all the good prizes. And they won all the good prizes. My table won all the good prizes, Pauline. So like, I just realised what a con it was and told them all the answers, and they won all the good prizes. You know, that was better than giving them all this bullshit that this orange T-shirt mob tried to give them all. I don't want to mention names here, Pauline, because I don't want to get sued here, Pauline, but that's the kind of grants and stupid shit you waste your money on that gives the Aborigine nothing. Okay, it gives the Aborigine nothing. And I was part of that when I was working in Alice Springs. And you can dig a little bit deeper as to the mob that I was working for. The mob that I was working for, Pauline. The mob that I was working for, Pauline. I could giggle my fucking ass off right now. I could totally giggle my fucking ass off right now. Because I know 1000% what Jacinta's going through.
Once she reached adulthood, she often acted as a bodyguard, if you like, or a protector of friends in the streets of Alice Springs. She had a reputation early of being able to look after herself, to handle herself. So her friends were safe with her. And I felt safe with her, actually. I used to protect her, but then she got to the stage where I felt that she was protecting me.
See, this part made me giggle, Pauline, about the stolen Mini and Delina, like, legend. And again, there are some really fantastic women that stand in groups together in Alice Springs, because they defend each other from all the stupid that's around them. And there are some beautiful groups of girls that do congregate together for this exact reason, and they're still doing it today, because there is a dangerous climate to grow up in.
So we're not worried by a fight. Her mother's the same. She is used to being abused. She's an Aboriginal woman in the Northern Territory, well, probably throughout most of Australia, actually. Aboriginal women are used to being abused. Their culture is particularly misogynist, although nobody likes to say it.
So get on the YouTubes, Pauline. Tappity tap. Nulla nulla, go. And there should be this old movie that comes up that says, even the women went to war. We went to war long before the white man even arrived. And even the women went to war. We'll make nulla nulla. And then this brain trip goes off in the woman's head that she now needs to go and show this cameraman how to make a nulla nulla. And the simplified, do you see what I'm getting at, Pauline? Like this is war. Nulla nulla. All right, so just simple. We'll get back onto the video. Blah.
What bothers me most is not the meatheads, if you like, the uneducated ratbags who just can't think of anything better to say.
This is always was, always will be, always was.
They're always around. I don't mind them showing the world what they're really like. I think it's actually good for the rest of the country to see what we're up against and how they instinctively behave. But I am pretty disturbed by the nonsense that the so-called leaders have come out with. See,
he's going to talk about Aboriginal leaders, Pauline, because he's talking about his daughter, Jacinta. But we could also talk about those Duttons and those Albos and those Adam Bants. That you know those kinds as well. Like they're the ones that manipulate and twist the arena in their party lines, so to speak. Their communist lines, so to speak. Their Jesuit papist lines, so to speak. Their pro-Israeli lines, so to speak. And a shifting axis of powers in the entire greater world, where they manipulated our population. Let's just get back onto the video.
That's one thing that really probably bothers me quite a bit more. You know, Noel Pearson, that rant he gave on ABC TV about our daughter was just lunacy. And
right, so now we get to the core of treachery, Pauline. All those criminal offences got a core somewhere, a core ideology coming from somewhere to treaty with their own government somehow, after taking all that native title in the Crown and then manipulating the people of the Crown and then manipulating the monetary interests of the usufruct and the profit of Prondra, and wham bam, thank you ma'am, we have an insurrection going on, Pauline, an insurrection going on, Pauline, instead of self-determination, according to the United Nations, because, like, we could prove that too. I've got enough evidence to prove their own admittance that they failed that. They failed that, Pauline. I've got enough evidence to see in their own words that they failed their self-determination and they had no other choice but to start undermining and attacking and causing fraud and all that sort of stuff, to buy land and manipulate mining interests and all that sort of stuff. And then we could look at Prime Minister and Cabinet. Prime Minister and Cabinet. And we're not just talking about Liberal or Labor. We're talking about Prime Minister and Cabinet. And we're talking about Federal Executive Council. That's kind of holding their hand, Pauline. Holding their hand. Holding their hand.
To me, typical big man stuff. So he accused my daughter of punching down on Aboriginal people. Given the rates of violence against Aboriginal women by Aboriginal men, I thought that was a particularly idiotic thing to say.
No. These people are pro-activists, professional activists, Pauline. He knows what to say. He's been playing the greenie communist activist manipulation game. Right. He's been trained what to say. He's training others what to say, Pauline. He's kind of like the leader of this insurrection, Pauline.
And he had no qualms. Yeah, he had no qualms about punching down on my daughter. I thought it was
but he and Marshall Langton between them, they can't count the number of people that they've abused in the past. One way or the other. It's just quite extraordinary. You know, whatever you're doing done with Jacinta in her youth, I tell you what, it's worked, Dave, because
this is a very regal woman, Pauline. Very regal woman, standing up for her own people in her own community, right? As an elder to her people. May be hated by a lot, but I'm sure there's a lot of Aboriginal women that look up to Jacinta across the Central Desert there that haven't even heard Lydia's name, don't even know Lydia's name, although Jacinta probably walks those streets and probably spoken to those people because that's where she grew up, where she grew up. Very regal woman in the parliament now, a tribal elder. We won't call these people traditional custodians anymore or any of this lying bullshit anymore, Pauline. We call this woman a respectful elder, a tribal elder, and she shows it in the parliament. She shows it in the parliament, Pauline, and she gets the respect of a greater population of the country for doing so. And I'm sure a good respect around the world for looking so regal in a cultural attire and being able to speak in not only on behalf of her people at home, but on behalf of all the constituents that she has to oversee as a senator, Pauline.
In the 5 or 10 years that I've been reporting on her, talking to her, reporting the abuse, I think I've only caught her on a down moment about twice. Once was this year, actually. So congratulations to you. Can you tell me, how did you end up yourself going to Walpuri country, meeting Bess, your wife? How did all that come about?
Do you know why, Pauline? She's educated. She's well spoken. She's well thought out. She speaks from the heart. And she speaks from the mind. She's a little bit clear on what she's doing. And it shows, doesn't it? She doesn't need to get down on her knees and drag a little blankie through the mud, does she?
As a teacher in New South Wales, worked down there for a while, then did extra training in special education and deaf education. And they were sending us back into regular schools because they had too many teachers that are deaf. And at the time, the territory was advertising for teachers that are deaf. So bingo. I put my name down and came up to Unama as a teacher of the deaf.
I don't want to take away from Dave's story because Dave's such a wonderful man, Pauline. Such a wonderful man, Pauline. But I never wanted a job in the Northern Territory. I was on a mission. I was driving a 1974 Leyland Mini, a Mini that was built in the Sydney Zetland factory, Pauline. And I was repeating something that the very first car that ever crossed this country was a Mini 1000. And then a Morris, I think it was as well, that followed it, 1100 Morris. And they both crossed the country. First two cars to ever cross the continent, Pauline. And I took my Leyland Mini 1974 and I'd gone across the desert and I'd arrived in Alice Springs and I was mucking around and I was sitting in the back of a backpack because I was drunk. I was completely drunk, Pauline, completely drunk. And the phone rang. The phone rang out of the blue and they said, "Do you want a job?" I was like, "Who's this?" And they said, "It's the government. The government, it's the government, Pauline, the government." And I was drunk. And I said, "I can't take this job, I'm drunk. How about you ring me tomorrow and we'll talk," right? And I was too drunk to talk. So we put the phone down and I spoke to this guy. And then I said, "No, I've got a hangover. I've got a hangover. How about I come in on Monday morning? I've got a hangover. I don't want to deal with all of this stuff. How about I just come in on Monday morning?" And I came in on that Monday morning and they asked me to start half an hour later, Pauline. They asked me to start half an hour later. And I stayed there for 2.5 years or 2 years. Can't remember. But I do remember the massive, colossal, integral fuck-up that it all was, Pauline. Like, totally. We'll go into that later. Let's just go on with this video. I just wanted to demonstrate to you that I never wanted a job in the Northern Territory, and they gave me one, and it started this game. That's how this all started, Pauline. So maybe it is the Northern Territory. And what makes me laugh is what he says in a second. So I'll comment on that as well.
Bess was an assistant teacher or teaching assistant at the time on the staff there. I was married to somebody else. That marriage was breaking down pretty rapidly. It's a bit like the Foreign Legion up here. People have problems with marriages and things and think that going to the bush might actually help. It doesn't. It has the opposite effect.
I laughed because I saw so many people doing it, but I lost a job, Pauline, in a financial crash in 2008, and I had this fantastic little car, and I knew about the history of my country. So I went vroom vroom across the Udinadatta and vroom vroom into Alice Springs and was drunk and got offered a job. And then all of this bizarre stuff happened in that job, like a crashing server and all of this hoo-ha about a civic compliance and well, I'll just keep my mouth shut.
And Bess was in a relationship with an extremely violent man. So
I was in the Northern Territory, Pauline, and I remember this case so well. It was in the Alice Springs courts, Pauline, and it rocked the town. Everybody was like, "Ooh." Everybody was like, "Ooh." Her face was smashed in like a squashed tomato. Ooh. And the whole town was like, "Ooh, fuck, that's bad. That's real bad. Like, who did that? Was that a white man?" No.
Both of our marriages broke up at the same time. Her family, I think, were looking for somebody who Bess could go to and safely leave the community. So with the full support of both my family and her family, we took a big risk and got together. And that was 44 years ago.
Very, very simple, honest story. Very simple, honest explanation. And he didn't even have to give it. He didn't even have to give it, Pauline. So, like, kudos. Much credit to David Price. I mean, 44 years of marriage, that's tough in itself. But to be in the desert and do that, I mean, well done, David. Like, you deserve congratulations to all of your family.
So I went to check my ability.
But when I hear that, Dave, stories like yours, right? And you've been such a unit since. I mean, I don't know, whether Bess could have done all that she did, and it was a terrific career without, you know, you in the background helping, and Jacinta obviously counselling you a bit too. People say that we need reconciliation, right? We need a voice, we need a treaty, we've got to be reconciled. When I listen to stories about your families, hundreds of thousands like it, the real reconciliation, you and Bess coming together and producing a daughter, Jacinta, I don't think that you can get more reconciled than that. What more do we have to do?
Now, before he goes into some sort of family personal thing, I fixed the Alice Springs Town Council Library, replaced every computer, helped them install an Aboriginal section with Aboriginal software dedicated to the Aboriginal historical record. I work with Aboriginal people to put that together. So this whole entire reconciliation process, there's an entire section in the Alice Springs Library dedicated just to their language and their books and their children's books, and software dedicated to them, with computer access dedicated to them. And they worked with me, and they were wonderful people. And there was no need for all this hoo-ha that the Eastern Coast activism mobs brought on. That they all brought it on, right? Because of all of the monetary interests that they had in their greedy little pockets, while they created fraud on an international stage. Fraud on an international stage, Pauline.
Well, exactly. When we worked in cultural awareness training, Jacinta used to stand up and say, well, I guess I'm a product of reconciliation. We're reconciled, we get on fine. And to be honest with you, I have no idea what they mean by reconciliation. I've never been able to work it out. And I've heard a lot of Aboriginal people up here say jokingly, us blackfellas have to reconcile with each other before we try to work it out with whitefellas.
Yeah, who brought that reconciliation bullshit around, and those Jews in the desert with the Uluru Mobby trying to undermine them? And that reconciliation, that's a banking term that says wipe out the past and zero the books. That's all a ledgering thing, isn't it, Pauline? That's all about the pauperisms and saying we've got to just ledger off this thing to zero. We've got to ledger it all off to zero, get them to reconcile the books. And they all went, what the fuck? No thanks. We don't want to be ripped off like that. And then Lydia came along and undermined them with this whole entire ideology.
There's an awful lot of cynicism amongst Aboriginal people on these things. So they're just labels.
See, Pauline, that they might be labels to the working class, but we know they mean so much more, don't they? They're pre-planned, pre-thought out words that drive towards certain modus operandi, and that's what we see. We see a generated attack on the Constitution over a decade, Pauline, longer. I mean, how's this ATSIS and all these other organisations that have been an apartheid on the people generated by a two-headed snake, three-headed snake called Lib Lab Green? Lib Lab Jib Jab.
I've been saying for a long time, I think the idea of reconciliation is to somehow make whitefellas feel better about being white or something. I honestly don't know.
See, that's a problem, Pauline. Nobody knew until I stood up and I straddled that gate in the courtroom in the territory, right? I walked into the territory, right, with bare feet, and I straddled that gate. And I had that gate right up against my balls, I did. 1 foot inside the court and 1 foot outside the court. And I said to that magistrate, I come into this courtroom with 1 foot on the land and 1 foot on the sea. Let my peoples go. You go and ask the Northern Territory, Pauline. I said, let my peoples go. And then I said, you don't have a right to try any of these people. And there was like 200 people in that courtroom, Pauline. That's what I did.
There's always been intermarriage between white and black. Always. Now, it hasn't always been it hasn't always worked out, and there's been problems in the past, and racism was a huge factor. But that's all, seems to me that it's all disappeared now. The thing that gets me too is the leaders, all of the leaders that I know of the Yes campaign have white ancestry and also have produced kids with white fellas, but you never hear about them. Right?
Yep, Pauline. Let's DNA check them all. Every single one of them. Let's jibby jab them and get the DNAs done. Back of the bus, Pauline. Back of the bus. Jibby jab, back of the bus. Oh, nah, jibby jab, back of the bus.
Mullendary McCarthy, I was friends and a colleague with her father. He was a wonderful man. He never gets a mention. I don't. And my daughter gets criticised because she does mention me on occasion or admits that I'm a father. Somebody like Jessica Mowboy, her father's from West Timor, he's Indonesian. You never hear about him. It's all...
See, that's all relative to the propaganda they push out on the ABCs, Pauline. The ABCs. See, that directive comes from Prime Minister and Cabinet. And then they push that out of Federal Executive Council into Prime Minister and Cabinet, out into all these Aboriginal ideologies, and away we go.
Well, it used to be Aboriginal, then Indigenous, now it's First Nations. The other side of people's ancestry and
all these changing titles to make them feel like there's something they're not. Or activists have made these titles up to make us feel bad over something they're not.
Connections, their loved ones, just get cancelled out. I don't understand that. That can't be actively working towards reconciliation.
What they mean is balance the books by undermining your constitution, removing your gods and replacing them with some fake god that doesn't agree with Section 116 of the Constitution.
And I think it means the division of Australians by race now is so artificial. It's so stupid. We're a mongrel nation, let's be honest. All of us have got mixed ancestry almost now. How on earth do you draw these hard lines of race? How do you feel, for instance, about this voice, right, that says now that your daughter is going to get more political rights than you because of race? I mean, how does that work out?
Oh, look, I've been saying this for years. And Susan Ingram, an Aboriginal academic, says that of the 800,000 claimed First Nations population, possibly 300,000 aren't Aboriginal. Michael Mansell has been banging on about this sort of stuff for years down in Tassie.
That sounds like numbers from a learned man, Pauline. Numbers from a learned man telling you that almost half of the Aboriginal claims on this fucking land are fake. Fake, Pauline. Fake. Fakety, fakety, fake. Fake lineage, fake corporations, fraudulent claims, undermining the Constitution, committing treachery, treason, all these crimes, Pauline.
He says there's thousands of people down there identifying who aren't. Bruce Pascoe claims to belong to 3 Aboriginal groups who have all said no, he doesn't. I honestly can't work it out.
Might have something to do with that state school curriculum, brainwashing all of those young kids into believing all of this codswallop in the first place, Pauline. Like I have a proud English history with a family tree that goes back to the 1600s, Pauline. That's before the Glorious Revolution. So that kind of puts my family in some sort of oath of allegiance and some sort of lineage and ancestry that these people just don't want to be taught. Don't want to be taught because the state school curricula wants to keep them in their pauperisms. In their pauperisms, Pauline. Can't teach them about your world, can we? Got to keep them in their pauperisms. They're abandoned children, aren't they, Pauline? Abandoned children.
Even if they were genuinely all Aboriginal, well over, somewhere between 50%, I saw a figure from Vicky Greaves, another Aboriginal academic, who said that now something like 70% nationally of Australian, of people who identify as Indigenous, produce kids with people who aren't. That's nationally. And in cities like Melbourne and Sydney, it's way over, 10 years ago, it was way over 80%.
You're such an honest man. This is pretty cool of you. So I agree. I totally agree. I've been watching it for the last 15 years of travel around the country, and I think that the rorting that's been going on has not been the Aboriginals' fault. They're going to take whatever the handouts they're going to be given, and it's up to the Prime Minister and Cabinet now. Why'd you set up all of these job networks directly out of the Prime Minister and Cabinet while all the other people's job networks were set up in social services or human services? Prime Minister, like the only people that can answer that are Prime Minister and Cabinet. So, why'd you do it, PMC? Why is everything Aboriginal inside the PMC and everything else under human services? Do you see these two different realms as usable people for some sort of reason in your patrician status?
So, and over 80% of their children identify as Indigenous. So it's just absurd. And of course, they're not all white. I mean,
It's absurd.
every ethnicity in Australia is marrying people who identify as Indigenous. So we've got a friend here, Sudanese.
Well, not everybody. 100% English here. 100% English here. Don't really know of anything outside of my family ever. Ever. Yeah, ever. That's a mistake you made there. I must be a rarity, hey, Justice Lonergan. Must be a rarity.
He's very worried about his daughter, who he's had to a Warrabee woman. We call them Sudanigines.
Oh, well,
That's what and they're
well, on you go. I mean, the Arkit family, you know.
oh yeah.
Well, it's just. I'm just stunned by the whole thing, you know, where you get Pat Dodson, the father of reconciliation. Wasn't it his father?
It's so wonderful to see to both of you. But now this $1 coin, the father of Federation, Henry Parkes, the father of Federation, Henry Parkes, printed on the bloody money, printed on that $1 coin.
And mother that were the architects of reconciliation because they got together. Snowy Dodson and his wife. I mean, the whole thing is nuts. Look, I just, you know, honestly, what your family, the three of you there, you know, Jacinta, you and Bess, have delivered in good sense to this country is just immeasurable. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Good on you. Thank you for having me.
Jacinta, your dad didn't have to get on the TV, but the guy's a legend. Like, you're a lucky girl, have a dad like that. The guy's a bloody legend. He's calm, relaxed, he knows what he's speaking. He had a little crack of a joke like larrikin Australians do, and he's right. He's 1,000% right, and it's fucking hilarious. It's totally hilarious, and it kind of 1,000% backs up everything that I've said. Everything that I've said. I will investigate what Indigenous culture is in future videos. I've got 2 wonderful videos to look at, Jacinta. One of them you're not going to like, and the other one you are going to like. So, everybody, you can see they are in a boat that is being rocked. And you can see that Pauline is obviously paying attention because we're not talking politics. We're talking constitutional law at the highest realms of the matter, having been sealed on Supreme Court record and being accused of being terrorists while watching terrorism occur in front of our very eyes. So you're starting to see a lot of this unravel while really cool men like Jacinta's dad here gets on TV and just talks naturally and demonstrates his daughter to be a pretty cool woman and his family to be a pretty cool family and Australian family, you know, just normal Australian family like we've been for the last 100 years.